be great if you brought your Bibles with you, but not just for Sunday only, obviously. It's meant to be read every day. For your convenience, we post it here, and typically the Bibles that are in front of you are the New Living Translation, which I like. It reads very well, and it seems to be a pretty good translation. This morning, because of the point that I wanted to try and make for you, I actually used a transliteration. It's called The Message. And it's probably, if you're a real fanatic about accuracy, then you probably want to stick with the King James or maybe the New King James. But the Message, to me, when read side by side with other translations, sometimes gives what's being said some real vitality. And I think this one in particular really helps make the point. So we're looking at Romans chapter 4, verses 13 through 16. That famous promise God gave Abraham that he and his children would possess the earth was not given because of something Abraham did or would do. It was based on God's decision to put everything together for him, which Abraham then entered when he believed. If those who get what God gives them only get it by doing everything they are told to do and filling out all the right forms properly signed, that eliminates personal trust completely and turns the promise into an ironclad contract. That's not a holy promise, that's a business deal. A contract drawn up by a hard-nosed lawyer and with plenty of fine print only makes sure that you will never be able to collect it. But if there is no contract in the first place, simply a promise, and God's promise at that, you can't break it. This is why the fulfillment of God's promise depends entirely on trusting God and His way, and then simply embracing Him and what He does. God's promise arrives as pure gift. I have a hunch that some of you, if you're like me, are tired. The word fatigue is not a word that's not unknown to you. It's part of your vocabulary. You're probably familiar with its definition as well. Burning eyes, slumped shoulders, gloomy spirit, and very robotic thoughts. You're tired. We're tired. We're a tired people. We're a tired generation. In fact, we're getting to be a rather tired society. We race and we run. Work weeks drag like an Arctic ice sheet. Your Monday mornings start showing up on Sunday nights. We slog our way through very long lines and long hours with really long faces because of our long lists of the things that we need to do, or the gadgets that we want to buy, or the people that we're trying to please. You know, there's grass to cut, there's diapers to change, there's teeth to clean, there's carpets, kids, canaries, everything needs our attention. The kids want more toys. The boss wants more hours. The school, they want more volunteers. The parents, they want more visits. And the church. The church? Yes. The church. You know that church. The serve more, pay more, pray more, attend more, host more, and read more church. And what can you say? I mean, the church speaks for God, doesn't it? It seems like every time we just catch our breath, someone else needs something else. It's like those Egyptian taskmasters for the Israelites long ago, who demanded another brick from the Hebrew slaves to construct their newest pyramid on the block. But God intervened in their lives and delivered the Israelites from the slave drivers who served Pharaoh's Nile-sized ego. God opened up the Red Sea like a curtain and then closed it shut like an aquarium. Pharaoh's army was swimming with the fishes, and the Hebrews became the charter members of the Land of No More Club. As in, no more bricks, no more mortar, no more mud, no more straw, no more mind-numbing forced labor. It was as if all of heaven was shouting to the Israelites, "You can rest now." And so they did. 1,000,000 sets of lungs sighed for an inch. Well, that's the amount of space between Exodus chapter 15 and Exodus chapter 16. The actual amount of time between those two chapters is about a month. And somewhere in that half-inch, 1-month interval, the Israelites decided that they wanted to go back to slavery. Because they started remembering the delicacies of the Egyptian lifestyle, which quite honestly wasn't probably anything better than just a bunch of bland stew. But nostalgia isn't a real stickler for detail. So they told Moses that they wanted to go back to the land of labor, sweat, and aching backs. And once Moses heard of the Israelites' demand, what do you think he said? Well, here's what he said. Did someone put a hex on you? Have you taken leave of your senses? And actually, I'm a little misspoken because that's taken from Galatians chapter 3, verse 1. That's Paul speaking, not Moses. Those were words for Christians, not for Hebrews. This was New Testament, not Old Testament. 1st century AD stuff, not 13th century BC stuff. However, the Christians of Paul's day were behaving just like the Hebrews. Now, both sets, the Hebrews who had been saved from Egyptian slavery and the new 1st century Christians who had been saved from their slavery to religion, had both been redeemed. Yet, both groups had turned their backs on their freedom despite the fact that the second redemption had really upstaged the first. Because this time in the second redemption, God sent Jesus, not Moses. He smote Satan, not Pharaoh, not with 10 plagues, but with one single cross. The Red Sea didn't open, but the grave did, right? And Jesus led anyone who wanted to follow him to the land of no more. No more law-keeping. No more striving for God's approval. You can rest now, Jesus told them. And they did. This time for about 14 pages, which is the distance in my Bible between the first sermon in Acts chapter 2 and the gathering of the church in Acts chapter 15. In Acts chapter 2, grace was preached. And in Acts chapter 15, grace was being questioned. Now, it wasn't that the people didn't believe in grace. They did. They believed in grace a lot. They just didn't believe in grace alone. They wanted to add to the work of Christ. You see, grace-a-lots believe in grace a lot. But they argue that Jesus almost finished his work, the work of salvation. Or that in the rowboat of the heaven-bound, Jesus paddles most of the time. But every so often, Jesus needs my help. So I help paddle the boat. We accumulate good works like I accumulated awards on my high school letterman's jacket. Go to that next slide, Ray. I was a Mayfair High School monsoon. That was our mascot, a monsoon. I mean, cowboys I get. Monsoons? I mean, it was just like a dust storm was our club motto or whatever. But I will just tell you this. In my mind, no morning was complete without at least a brief survey of my accomplishments. Each patch was a reward for my hard work. I played football to earn that football emblem, and then the chevrons that came thereafter with each successive season. I ran track and I earned that winged foot badge and more chevrons to that. I played soccer to earn that soccer ball patch. I wrestled to earn that grappler's emblem. I even had medals from my CIF accomplishments. Could anything be more gratifying than earning these patches I dreamed? Yes. What could be more gratifying? Showing them off. Which I did. On the day of any particular game I played, I wore my letterman's jacket. I strolled through campus like I was the King of England. Accomplishments, they receive applause. Guys envied them. And the girls, oh my goodness. I thought that the girls would just want to come up and kind of rub on that letter and all those badges and all those accomplishments, and then they'd ask me out on a date. Teenagers, right? But I became a Christian during my letterman's days, and I made the assumption that God grades on a similar merit-based system. Good athletes move up and they get their accomplishments. Well, good people go to heaven, right? So I resolved to amass a multitude of spiritual badges. An embroidered Bible for Bible study, folded hands to indicate prayer, a child sleeping on the pew to indicate church attendance, all those things. I worked toward that day, that glorious, glorious day when God, amid falling confetti and hoopla and dancing cherubim, would eternally fit me with my patch-laden Christian letterman's jacket and welcome me into His eternal kingdom where I could humbly display all of my accomplishments for all to see, for all of eternity. But then some thorny questions started popping up. For instance, if God saves good people, then how good is good? For instance, God expects us to have integrity of speech. But how much? What is the permitted percentage of exaggeration, let's say? Suppose the required score is 80 and I score a 79. How do I know my score? How can I improve my score? So you know what I did? I got smart and I sought the help and the answer to that question from a minister. Surely the preacher could tell me how good is good enough. So I asked him the question, and you know what? He gave me the answer. And I was so excited. Okay, finally, some smart guy can tell me the answer. And you know what his answer to me was? One word: do. Do. Do better. Do more. Do now. Do good and you'll be okay. Do more and you'll be saved. Do right and you'll be all right. Do, be, do. Have you heard that tune before? We all have. Most people embrace the assumption that God saves good people. All right, if that floats your boat, then be good, be moral, be honest, be decent, pray the rosary, keep the Sabbath, keep your promises, pray to the east 5 times a day, stay clean, stay sober, pay taxes, earn all those patches. Yet for all the talk about being good, there was still no one who could answer the fundamental question, what level of good is good enough? And frankly, at stake is our eternal destination. But we give more thought and confidence to a lasagna recipe than we do about our eternal hope. Fortunately, God has the answer. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is a gift of God. And church, I'm sorry to tell you, I'm sorry to burst your bubble. I went through decades of the kind of person I've described for you, but the conclusion and the truth is, you and I contribute nothing. Zilch. Nada. Zero. As opposed to the award-filled Letterman's jacket, salvation of the soul is unearned. It's a gift. Our merit merits nothing. God's work, on the other hand, merits everything. And that was Paul's message to the grace-a-lots. He said in Galatians chapter 3, verse 13, Christ redeemed us from that self-defeating, cursed life by absorbing it completely into himself. And his translation is, say no to the pyramids and the bricks. Say no to the rules and the lists. Say no to the slavery and performance. Jesus redeemed you. Apparently, those Christians didn't understand. And maybe you do. But if you don't, let me give you an example. I want to talk about some Chilean miners. These miners were trapped beneath 2,000 feet of solid rock. 33 men were trapped there, and they are absolutely desperate. They ate 2 spoonfuls of tuna, a sip of milk, and a morsel of peaches every other day. For 2 months, they prayed for someone to save them. And on the surface, the Chilean rescue team was working around the clock. They were consulting with NASA. They were consulting with all sorts of experts for a way in which to extract these 33 miners from a mine shaft from which no one otherwise could come out alive. They designed a 13-foot-long capsule and drilled an excavation tunnel. Now, there was absolutely no guarantee of success because no one had ever been trapped that far underground and lived to tell about it. But on October 13th, 2010, the men began to emerge, slapping high fives, kissing the ground, praying on their knees. These men were redeemed. A great-grandfather was among them. A 44-year-old who was planning his wedding was among another one. A 19-year-old kid, teenager, was among the rescued. All had different stories, but all had made the identically same decision. They trusted someone else to save them. No one returned the rescue offer with a declaration of independence. Oh, no. Just hand me another drill, I'll find my way out. They didn't do that. They stared at their stone tomb long enough to reach the unanimous opinion that we need someone to penetrate this world and pull us out. And when the rescue capsule came, what did they do? They climbed in it. So why is it so hard for us to simply do the same? We find it easier to trust in the miracle of the resurrection than in the miracle of grace. We so fear failure that we create an image of perfection just in case heaven is even more disappointed in us than we are. And the result, church? Fatigue. Attempts at self-salvation guarantee nothing but exhaustion. We scamper and we scurry and we try to please God, collecting merit badges and brownie points. And we scowl at anyone who would question our accomplishments. But the Hebrew writer said in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 9, your hearts should be strengthened by God's grace, not by obeying rules. Church, Jesus did not say, come to me, all who are perfect and sinless. He said just the opposite. Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. I want you to pause for just a minute and think, I've heard that before. I can quote it. But have you ever considered what was Jesus talking about when he said, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden? I mean, was he talking to a bunch of people whose backs were stooped over because they were carrying large bundles of goods? I don't think so. He was talking to the Jewish people that were weary from having to keep all the rules established by the Pharisees and the Sadducees. There were over 600 rules associated with one commandment about keeping the Sabbath. Can you imagine trying to keep all those rules? It would be exhausting. And Jesus found the children that he had created that were burdened by a bunch of rule-enforcing rule keepers who couldn't even keep the rules themselves. And these folks were tired. They were weary. They were heavy laden from the rules that were being put on their shoulders in the name of religion. So let me read this back to you once again with that background in mind. Matthew 11, chapter 28. Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. You know, there's no fine print in that statement. The proverbial other shoe is not going to drop. So, church, let me encourage you to quit performing for God. Of all the things that we have to earn in life, you have it already. You can't break God's promise. Wow. God made a promise to me that I can't break. Well, that's comforting. That's reassuring. I think I can find some rest in that. And when you do, church, you'll find that your life will blossom. And you'll find yourself doing things, not because you have to, but because your roots have sunk down into the soil of God's amazing and fertile grace. You can't break God's promise. I've told you many times before, and I've shared again in this message, I grew up in a church in which you go to church on Sunday morning, you go to church on Sunday night, you go to church on Wednesday, you go to a gospel meeting sometime during the summertime. It's usually a week, sometimes it's 2 weeks. And then you get busy with church. You give, you work, you teach, you pray, you do all this kind of stuff. And I grew up in an environment thinking that, well, if I have 3,965 points at the end of my life, ding, 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 I get to go to heaven. And it was that lifestyle that led me, as I've told you before, to a complete collapse of my Christianity. It happened during a time which was very stressful for me and my children. My first wife had just passed away. And I'm with my dad, and we're at the end of the driveway, having just come from her celebration, which was here. And off in the distance, there was this glow. And at the time, we didn't think much of it. We thought it could be a fire, but it was so far away. Well, with the Santa Ana winds during that October blowing this way, we ran face to face with the cedar fire. And we had to evacuate. And I can remember loading my dog and my kids and a few basics along with my mother-in-law who was with us and, important papers. And I stood at the end of my driveway and I put my hands up to the sky and said, "Must you take my house too?" And then I quit. I quit coming here for almost 2 years. Oh, I would attend occasionally for the children's benefit, but I was empty. My gas level was gone. I was on fumes. And look at all that good stuff I was doing for the church. That's what I'm thinking. God, how can you do this to me? I've gone every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. I was teaching class here. I was occasionally preaching here. I was leading singing here. What else can I do? And this is what you do to me, God? Fine, I'm done. And I was out. And it wasn't until a phone call from the former preacher here, Shane, that said, we could really use some help in leading us in song. Would you consider coming back? Prayed about it, thought about it. Yeah, okay. I'll do it just one time, though. I can't commit to anything longer than that. That's fine. Just come back. And, of course, one time leads to two, and two times leads to three, and now I'm standing in front of you and I'm preaching. Okay, so what happened? Because I figured out, like I mentioned to you in the tease this morning, Jesus Christ did not die for a religion. He died for a relationship. And what I was doing before church was religion. It was rule keeping. It was checking off the boxes, doing all the right things, and expecting that in exchange for that, I would have this beautiful Christian letterman's jacket, and God would be so happy with me, He would just reward me to no end. And all the rule keeping cost me, in my head, my wife and almost my home. A lot of good rule keeping does, right? But during that 2-year journey for me, kind of out in the wilderness, I finally figured out that what Jesus wants from us is not a bunch of rule keeping. He wants you to have a relationship. And if you have a relationship with Jesus, then what you do is the natural outpouring of a heart in thankfulness and gratitude for what Jesus has done for you, not because you have to. And it changes everything. Changes everything. Now when you come to church, you don't come because you have to, you come because you want to. Now if you give because you want to. If you pray, it's because you want to. You want to communicate with God. You want to have that connection with God. If you read His Word, it's because you want to know more about Him. Not because you have to, but because you're so thankful what Jesus did for you that you can't thank Him enough and you can't know Him enough. Thank you. And that's why Jesus said, "Come, all of you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Jesus did everything. We do nothing. Our sole responsibility as Christians is to love and worship our God. And in that process, and as we go through life, loving and worshiping our God, what happens? We end up helping others, right? We talk to them. We care about them. We pray for them. Stuff that you used to think was deeds that you were doing for God now are not deeds. It's just a natural outgrowth of a loving relationship with your Father. That's what it's about. And when you do that, then life becomes not so much a system of rule keeping, which is fatiguing and exhausting. It's a loving, living relationship with a God who you cannot thank enough and then want to serve in the best way you know how. And He's given us all sorts of different talents and different abilities. I can't do what you do. Probably a lot of you could do what I do. But it means that each of us is a different part of a body, and all parts are important. And you doing your part, and me doing my part, and you doing your part, and you doing your part, it all works for this body of Christ that meets here in this place to serve this community. That's why we're here. So, church, would you please consider today an opportunity to just rest? Quit performing for God. Just get to know Him. And once you get to know Him, it changes everything. So, Ray, can you pull up the next slide, because I forgot what song. Oh, on Jordan's stormy banks I stand. And cast a wishful eye. There's a word called rest in that song, and I think it talks about what we've just been discussing. So we're going to stand and sing this song. As we do, if you have any announcements or prayer requests that you'd like to make, please hand them forward, and we'll talk about them after the singing of this song. Let's stand, please.